And to anybody that maybe hasn't heard it, I did an interview with Vina Dubal, and if you want to hear her vision, I think she was pretty candid there, and actually maybe even didn't want to say some of the things that were said. Because I had a couple people, I think you two were among them, catching her in some lies there. Um, but if you want to hear her vision, I would recommend go listen to that or watch that on YouTube here, because that is it's not a vision I want. I don't think any of you that I know in here want that. And you'll be very eye open to hear what this far other side thinks and what they want.
She's a professor at Hastings, and she specializes in talking about exploited workers and the fissured workplace. You know, she's the go-to person that these labor writers interview. You know, and she was touting AB5 before, during, and after, but she doesn't have a grasp about the details of the law itself. And I was shocked when I watched her interview with you, Steve, because she really didn't know what she was talking about about some of the aspects of the bill. She actually said that Gail, who owns the opera company, could turn her opera into a co-op or something and pass the ABC test. It's completely absurd. She said that doctors were exempt because they have a higher incomes than anybody else, which is not true at all. She didn't even know she didn't know what EDD stood for.
I need to tell you too, in that interview, when I said that and she was referencing that co-op, she actually used an example of one in San Diego that's a nonprofit. And she was saying why, we've talked with them, they could do it. I actually talked with Gail after the fact. There's only one nonprofit opera house in San Diego. Gail knows the lady very well. That never happened.
Yes, she does. She only focuses on taxi companies and rideshare, and compares rideshare to sharecroppers. I mean, these are the kinds of tropes that she perpetrates, and it's very demeaning and dismissive to those of us who are independent professionals whose careers have been impacted. You know, they don't acknowledge, they dismiss our AB5 stories. It's not speculation in California what can happen when these laws get passed. We are the canary in the coal mine here. We know across the board. There's a person in my group who was a licensed pharmacist who used to work as an independent contractor as a career because she would inspect compounding pharmacies up and down the state. Licensed pharmacists don't have an exemption from AB5, even though licensed psychologists do. Why is that? Why do licensed healthcare professionals with a doctorate degree, not allowed to make a living the way that they see fit to apply their expertise as a consultant?
Or in-house home care.
If you look at the cross section of professions that filed public comments opposing the actions the U.S. Labor Department's trying to take right now, there is no way anyone could exempt all these professions because people don't even realize that they exist. It was everybody from interior decorator type companies that go in and help real estate companies with whatever they're doing in buildings, to demolitions experts who are brought into certain types of construction jobs, to highly specialized veterinarians who work with big herds of cattle and they go from cattle farm to cattle farm. The cross section of professions that filed these public comments, it's staggering if you go through and look at it. And the idea that the attitude of, well, why can't you just change the way you make a living so we can have the world the way we want it? I find that attitude to be repulsive. These are people who have built businesses, sometimes like me, over decades. We chose this. We chose to be independent. We're succeeding at it. Get off our lawns.
You pay your taxes.
Yeah.
Leave us alone. We mention this every time we do a live stream. You guys, we pay our taxes.
I pay through the nose in taxes. And so this whole attitude of, well, you don't matter and you can be made to suffer because we think the world could be better in our mystical vision of a magical place that has never existed in reality before. I just find it atrociously offensive.
Well, I recommend people, if they want to see the various cross sections of professions and be shocked by some of the stories, horrible stories, just click on my AB5 personal stories role
Yeah.
there. That's and
I put it in the
it's
comments, you guys. It's up there. I will be putting them in the show notes too. I put
forensic nurses.
Kim's link and fly fishermen. You and I
Yep.
talked about fly fishermen. Like, what are you going to W-2 a fly fisherman instructor?
Yacht captains, lactation consultants, genealogists, massage therapists, wellness profession, the wedding planning industry, event meetings and events, community theaters that is very well documented.
Nonprofits should be a slap across the face to any one of you that's questioning this.
Nonprofits, political campaigns. If you're a little grassroots political candidate, grassroots, you have to make your campaign workers employees. Where you can't have them be independent contractors anymore. So it stifles. I mean, and that's by design, obviously. There's just so many different respiratory therapists, nurse midwives, forensic nurses. The AB5, and we got a story from a forensic nurse who said AB5 actually is detrimental to rape victims, because they don't, especially in rural communities, because these hospitals in rural communities can't afford to keep a forensic nurse on staff to do these evidentiary forensic examinations with sensitivity that they're trained to do. So the wait times would be longer, and the if some staff person tried to do it, it would just, they don't know what they're doing. Rehab specialists, all sorts of healthcare professionals, consultants of all kinds, radio engineers, sign language interpreters. When AB5 first went into effect, there was lack of access to sign language interpreters, which is ADA mandated because sign language interpreters are independent contractors. And of course, one of the big group that was involved, in the beginning was interpreters and translators, musicians, community theater, performing artists. These are all people, a lot of them are liberal, progressive types of people that were protesting to Lorena Gonzalez's face.
Yeah.
And she was calling all of them Trump supporters and radical MAGA people when she knew full well that we weren't.
Yeah.
That, I mean, when we protested one of her appearances, the people that were in the audience were Hispanic interpreters and performing artists from Hollywood.
Yeah.
And she started shouting us down. It was unbelievable. So they have their narrative. They try to characterize our freelancer movement, but it's just across the board. It affects all demographics, all political affiliations, and all types of professions, whether they're gig app-based professions or six-figure earners.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
And it is I mean, the testimony I gave at one of the U.S. Labor Department public hearings last summer was, why are you pro-choice about what happens in my uterus, but not about how I make a living?
Right.
Let's have that conversation. This shouldn't be a partisan thing. It just shouldn't. It unfortunately is. And to that end, I wanted to mention two things because I know we're getting ready to wrap up. Again, House Resolution 72, call your congressperson and ask them to co-sponsor it. I also wanted to alert people. We have it from a little birdie that it's not been announced publicly yet, but there's probably going to be a hearing about the PRO Act in the United States Senate in the month of March. People shouldn't panic about that. That bill is not going to go anywhere as long as the Republicans control the House. It may get through the Senate, which it didn't last time, but it's not going to get through the House no matter what right now. But the fact that there's a big public hearing coming up, that's an opportunity to write letters to you're going to see this in the press. You're going to see it on Twitter. You're going to see things start to appear in media because this hearing is held. So write letters to the editor. It's a good chance to call your senator, your two senators from your state and say, hey, I disagree what's going on here. If you want to go to the United States Senate website for it's called the HELP Committee. The L in the HELP is for labor. If you want to go there, see who the members are, send them an email and say, hey, I think what you're doing is wrong. This is a really good chance to raise your voice and do those two things, both support House Resolution 72 and let folks know that you disagree with the United States Senate continuing to push the PRO